welcome you to this Canvas orientation session. Thank you for signing up so early on in the process. We're excited to have you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can just hop right into this. Okay, want to start you off with a little preview of where we are eventually headed in this session. So we're not going to talk about this view we're looking at too much right now. We're going to circle back to it a little later on, but just to give you some context of where we're headed. So this is the modules page in Canvas. This is where all of your course content is laid out and organized for your students to interact with. This is roughly the equivalent of the course site homepage you're used to seeing in OL with all of your topics and content laid out there. So you have your module titles and you have your content built out within those modules, kind of like this. So that's where we're headed, but we have to zoom back out, talk about site navigation, just Canvas in general. Then we'll talk about course site navigation and a couple other little side topics within there. We will then talk about editing content, since you'll be working with a lot of migrated stuff. That's probably where you'll start, is by editing things. And then we'll talk about adding content and very quickly setting up your gradebook and how you basically go about doing grading in Canvas. Okay, so let's zoom out to the site level and talk about site navigation in Canvas. When you first log into Canvas, you will be on the dashboard here. So basically, like your dashboard in OL, you have all of your current and upcoming courses listed here in these course cards rather than just the text links. Published courses will be listed first. That's what your students can see. Below that, you will have your unpublished courses that students can't see. Eventually, you'll have courses that are not upcoming or current. You'll have past courses as well. Those are located in a different spot in Canvas. So once the course term ends, which is usually a week or two after the last day of classes, your course sites will be archived within Canvas. So this means a couple of things. It means first that those course sites are in a different spot. It also means those course sites will become read-only to both you and your students. They can't submit anything. You can't edit anything. But you can still import content from those archived course sites to your to your upcoming or current semester's classes and then edit the content there. So the one thing you might think about there is, what if your students need an extension after that week or two when the site becomes read-only? You can change the course site settings for that course to have a later course end date. That'll make it so that the students can interact with it again and do whatever work they need to do. To access those archived course sites, you go to the Courses tab just below the Dashboard tab here on the Canvas sidebar. That's what you're going to use for your site navigation, is the sidebar on the left. Click on the Courses tab. It's the same list of published and unpublished courses, but at the bottom, you have an all courses link that'll show you everything, including those archived courses. So that's where you'll go for those eventually. A couple other quick things about the dashboard. It is customizable to a certain extent in terms of the look and feel here, so play around with that. It's mostly just for you. It doesn't impact your students' experience looking at your course cards and the layout or anything. For the most part, there's one or two things I think you can do that will impact what students see, but for the most part, it's just for you. Okay, let's take a look at this first tab at the top now. This is the Account tab. That'll pop out a little menu for you. We're not going to talk about all of this stuff here, just a few things. Notifications. You can configure notifications in general for your account in Canvas, but you can also change those notifications up by specific course if you want notifications for a specific course to work a little bit differently than your default settings. And if you decide to use the Canvas Teacher app on your device, which I'll talk about more in a minute, you will also be able to configure what notifications you receive on your device through the Canvas Teacher app. You have a profile that is editable to a certain degree, kind of like OL. We'll talk about one of these other links a little later on too, but the last one I want to mention now is this QR for mobile login link. So if you decide to use the Canvas Teacher app, you would first download it from the App Store on your phone or tablet, whatever. And then on your desktop or laptop machine, you would come back here to the Account tab and click QR for mobile login, then proceed to generate a QR code that you could scan with the camera on your device. And that's the easiest way to make sure that your app is synced properly to your Berkeley Canvas account. You should only have to do that once, but it is definitely the most efficient way to do that. So I recommend that process. The Canvas Teacher app is really great for a lot of things. One thing it's not great for is building out your course site. So you're going to want to do the layout and all of that building stuff. The more intense work of building out your course sites should be done on your laptop or desktop. But the app is super great for everyday administrative types of tasks like taking attendance, grading for the most part, depending on what you're doing there, communicating with your students, even updating your course content, depending on what you're doing. So like if you need to tweak instructions or change due dates, super great for that, just not so great for actually building out your course site. All right, moving down the list of the Canvas sidebar here, we've covered the dashboard and courses groups. If you end up using them in Canvas, you'll see this icon and you can manage some things about groups in there. If you don't use groups, you won't see the icon. The calendar tool, I do want to spend a minute talking about this because we think it is a decent improvement over the calendar tool available in OL. In OL, you have separate calendars for each course site, which are accessible through the course sites themselves. In Canvas, it's more of a global calendar that pulls in all of your course site calendars to one view here. You can do some really nice things like view any due dates that you have configured for any of your assignments in one spot. And if you need to change a due date, you can just drag and drop it to a different date and it'll update in the course as well, which is very, very handy. And then up in the top right, you can create new events directly in the calendar. It's not just fed by things that you put in your course site. You can click the plus icon to create a new event up here in the top right. The first one is just a normal event that you would add to any calendar. It's a thing you're doing in person or over Zoom or whatever, but you can select which calendar it displays on. So it could be your personal calendar, which just shows up as your name. It could be a specific course calendar, so all the students in that course could see it, or it could be a specific group of students if you created student groups. So you have some good options there. The only other one I want to mention here is the appointment group event type. If you've ever used Google Calendar appointment slots, this is pretty similar to that. If you haven't, the way this works is you set up a date and time range. So let's say it's today. Actually, no, let's say it's tomorrow from 1 to 2. That's a big range, 1 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's fine. And then you say within that time range on that date, and you can configure multiple dates with multiple time ranges, you want to divide that range of time into 15-minute appointment slots. You configure all of that, you click go, and it generates all of those appointment slots for you. You select the calendar you want it to show up on, obviously give it a name and location, could be for your office hours, for instance. And then maybe you say only one person can sign up for each slot. Or if it's for a group project or something, you could say 4 people can sign up for the slot. Once you click publish, whatever calendar you select here, whoever has access to view that calendar, likely students enrolled in the course, obviously, they can come in here, see those slots, click on one, sign up, and you both get notifications of that. Moving down the list, the next one here is the first of the 2 main ways you can communicate with your students in Canvas. this one is a little misleading because of the title, I think. It's called the inbox, but this is not like quick mail. It's not like an email client. It's better thought of as a messaging app. This will become more obvious as we talk about it. So if you send something from the inbox to a student or multiple students, it's not sending them an email. It's sending them a notification of a message that they've received in Canvas to their email. That sounds pretty similar, but it's an important distinction because you can configure notifications, remember? So they can say, send me these less frequently, please. So it's not necessarily as instantaneous as an email message. And to get the full experience of that message, they would want to come into Canvas. And they could reply to the notification, which would send you a message, but it's best if all the communication is done within the interface here. To send a new message, you just click the pencil and paper icon up at the top to compose a new message. First, you select a course. Then if you click the contacts icon in the to field over here to the right, you can select which type of person enrolled in the course you're sending it to. So let's send it to our students. And then we can send it to everybody who fits that criteria, or we can select an individual student from the list. We'll just say all. So now it's sending it to this course, all of the students in the course. Give it a subject, of course. And then in most cases, when you're sending inbox messages in Canvas to multiple people, I would recommend ticking the send an individual message to each recipient box. If you don't, if anybody replies to that message, it will reply all to everyone. So if you want that behavior, fine. You don't need to check the box, but most of the time people don't. So I like to point that out. The other way this is better thought of as a messaging app than an email client is you don't have any text editing options here. This is just plain text. All you're doing is typing stuff in. You could paste a link in, but it wouldn't be clickable. They'd have to copy and paste it. But you can add attachments down here. Or a nice feature is you can record an audio or video comment on the fly to be part of the message, which is kind of nice. Skipping over a few of these, Studio is short for Canvas Studio. That is Canvas's media solution. It is kind of like Kaltura in OL, if you're familiar with that. If you're not, it is both a repository for you to upload audio or video content and then share it with students as resources. You could also use its recording application to record new audio or video. Canvas Studio lets you record computer sound, by the way, which is nice. You can also use it for assessments, both delivering assessments in the form of video quizzes and collecting assessments. So if students submit to an assessment using Canvas Studio, which is an option, you could provide them time-stamped feedback on their media submissions, which is nice. My Media, if you use Kaltura in OL currently, that's where your Kaltura content will be available. It's also available in your individual course sites, but at the site level, these are the two spots. All right, that was site level navigation. Let's head back to the dashboard where we know we can view all our courses and take a look at a course. Before we get into course site navigation, I have a couple of side topics that don't really fit anywhere else nicely. So I'm going to talk about them now. So to get into our course site, we're just going to find the name of the one we want, click on the link for it. And here we are at our course site homepage. You notice we don't automatically go to the modules page where we started, which is roughly the equivalent of where you would go when you first click on an OL course site link. So that's a little bit different here in Canvas. We'll talk about that more in a second. But our couple of side topics first. Up here in the top right, import existing content. You're going to have to do that eventually. That's where we start the process, just so you're aware. Up here above that, this little left arrow or arrow pointing to the left, more accurately. If you click that, it'll show up in a lot of places in Canvas. It'll give you some context about where you are. If something's different than what you're used to in OL, this will get you on the right track. It'll give you some links related to where you are as well. They're Canvas created documents, though. They're not Berkeley specific, so they may not 100% pertain to what you're interested in learning. That's what the training course is for, but in a pinch, this can get you on the right track, probably. So that shows up in a lot of places in Canvas, this little arrow. All right, first we're going to talk about the home page briefly, and then we're going to talk about how your students navigate around your course site, and then we'll get into how you will navigate around here and do things in here. So we've created a handful of homepage templates for you to choose from and build out. This is an example of one that we have built out a little bit, not fully, but a little bit. So you can put in a course welcome video or just a static image or nothing, but there's a way for you to do that out of the box. And then your course description, some basic course resources, instructor info. And then down here is your first sort of preview to how students will navigate around your course sites. We have buttons built out for your modules. So a student looking for a module that's about halfway through the course content doesn't need to go to the modules page directly and scroll to it past all of the other modules. They can just click here and it'll automatically bring them to that module on the modules page. It just drops them down directly to where it is. If you don't like this particular template, like I said, we have a few to choose from, and you can change it by clicking Choose Homepage over on the right. You have a few different options here, but we've decided to make a page your homepage. It's just a regular page, essentially the same options you have in OL to make a page, but you can choose to make it the homepage. That's all this means. To change it, we click the Change button. This brings us to our full list of pages in this Canvas course. It's alphabetical though, so you can find all the home pages under H, and then take a look at the 5 that are here for you right now. We're using layout 4 with charcoal. You could check out layouts 2 and 1, or you can look at the red version of layout 4, which is the same thing in red. So maybe you like that better. To change it, you would click the More button to the right of that page. If I say the More button, that's just 3 dots all the way to the right of something. That's going to show up a lot in Canvas. Once you click that More button, your third option is Use as Front Page. It updates here. And if you click Home over here, it updates here. So now this is, the filler text that we've put in for you, but you can come up here to this Edit button and build it out a little bit. We're not going to do that in a home page. I will show you how to edit a page, and everything we talk about there can be applied to this. And I'll make it clear what I'm talking about when we get there. But I'll tell you how you can update these buttons to be the correct modules and everything. All right. Like I said, before we get into navigating around here as a faculty member, I think it's a good idea to take a look at it from the student perspective, just so we have that as a frame of reference when we're thinking about how to organize things or how students are going to navigate with the stuff we put in here. You can get there by clicking the student view in the top right. You'll have this purple or pink bar at the bottom telling you you're in student view. There's a leave button, reset student button. So this actually creates a test student in your course, which is nice. So you could submit something and then go grade that test student's work to figure all of that out. And this lets you reset things that you do as that test student. Not everything resets. If you post to a discussion forum, that's going to stay as the test student post, but most things reset. Anyway, here we are as a student. You can see everything as it looks like for a student, pretty close to your view. None of these module buttons work anymore, of course, because I changed the template and didn't change it back. But if they did, I would click on Welcome to the course my first time, and that would take me to modules and scroll me down to the Welcome to the course module here. And then as a student, I'm just going to click on the first thing in that module, right? This one's a page. I'm going to look at the content that's here for me. And then I'm going to use these previous and next buttons probably to navigate through the rest of the content in the order in which it appears on the modules page. So I like to point that out just because Canvas sort of funnels you into that navigational way of operating a bit more than OL does. So that's important to keep in mind when thinking about what things to put where in your course site, probably in the order in which you want students to interact with them. All right, that's the student view. Now we can talk about course navigation. As you may have surmised, course site navigation is done through the course navigation menu here to the right of your Canvas sidebar over here. This menu, just like the similar one in OL, can disappear on you from time to time. And just like in OL, you have a hamburger menu icon, which you can toggle to get that menu back. It goes away on its own sometimes, depending on where you are in Canvas. So that's how you get it back. I'm going to breeze through mentioning a bunch of these things, and then we're going to actually go into some of them and talk about what you do there. So we've already been to the home page. Announcements, that's the second main way you can communicate with your students. We'll go there. Attendance, I'll show you how to take attendance in Canvas. We're going to skip over grades today. And that's mainly because you set up your gradebook somewhere else and you do your grading somewhere else. Grades is mostly for viewing all of your students' grades in one handy place. There are also some really great features and options in there that we'll talk about in the gradebook and grading session that's coming up later. But for today, we don't need to talk about those. Modules, we will return here later and talk about these in a lot more depth, but that's where we are. These next few links through like item banks, but also including pages, allow me to tell you about another way in which Canvas is sort of organized a little bit differently on the back end as compared to OL. So starting with OL, we have our course site homepage. All of the content is listed there, just like it is in modules here in Canvas. And that is where that content actually lives. So if you add anything to your course site, you're adding it there. If you're deleting anything from your course site, you're deleting it from there. This is pretty close to the way Canvas works, but not quite. All of the items you see here actually exist in one of these pages over here. So if it's a page resource, it actually exists in pages, and I'm just including it in the module outline here for students to interact with. If it's an assignment, it shows up over here, quizzes, discussions, rubrics, item banks, all that stuff. They actually live over there. Really, you only need to know about this when it comes to deleting things from your course site. So if I wanted to fully delete my learning outcomes for some random reason from my course site, if I tried to do that from modules, it just says remove. That's because I'm only removing it from the modules outline. It's not being deleted. I would have to go to pages and find it and delete it there. And when I look at it there, it does say delete. So that's how you can remember. Sometimes you just want to remove it from here and keep it in the other place. It's up to you. Or sometimes you just want to unpublish it. I'll show you how to do that too. Okay, skipping over a bunch of these. New analytics, you can see some good statistics about student participation in your course. You can also send messages from there to students who, for instance, haven't submitted to a specific assignment. It'll pull that information in for you, which is nice. The people page, it's just your roster. Course gallery, that's where your Kaltura content shows up if you use it. Flat for education. If anybody is interested or uses notation software, this is going to be exciting for you. Flat for Education is a web-based notation software. This is separate from the Canvas project, but kind of available at the same time when you get into Canvas. So the Canvas sessions I'll be leading won't be covering this, but we have separate Flat for Education sessions coming up. But it's a web-based notation software fully integrated with Canvas that lets you provide students with interactive notation resources, lets you assign work using notation software that can be graded right in Canvas. So you could use it for composition assignments, things like that. And there's a whole ton of other great features. I'm not doing it justice by any means, but we're very excited about it. So if that's something you're interested in, look for those training sessions in the future. Skipping over a lot more of these, settings is where you would go to change that course end date I mentioned earlier if you needed to provide students with an extension after the semester ends. All right. That was a lot of me just showing you stuff and explaining you stuff. Let's actually do some stuff. First thing we're going to do is learn how to send announcements up here. So announcements in terms of how students receive them is pretty similar to the inbox feature. It's just sending them a notification of the announcement to their Berkeley Gmail accounts. To get the full experience, they come here to see it. But to post an announcement, click the plus announcement button up in the top right. This does give you the full text editor as opposed to the inbox, which does not. So maybe that's the option you would like. And it sends it to everybody in the course by default. The text editor is essentially the same text editor as the one you're used to in OL. There are some extra really great features in here that I'll point out when we get to editing content a little bit later. But for the most part, all the same options still exist here, along with some extra stuff. So you can add your links, images, audio, video, documents, etc. Another thing you can do with Canvas announcements is delay the posting of the announcement to a future date or time. So maybe it's 11 p.m. and you thought of the announcement you want to send, but you shouldn't send it till 9 a.m. the next day. You don't want to forget. You can schedule it to post 9 a.m. the next day. Let's take attendance now. Attendance is fairly straightforward in Canvas, but there are some key differences to how it works as opposed to OL. So in OL, you can only take attendance for the dates and times which your class actually meets. In Canvas, you can take attendance for any day. And by default, you should be on the proper day when you come in here, but you might not be every time. So it's always a good idea to make sure you're on the correct date so you don't accidentally take attendance for tomorrow instead of today. To take attendance, you'll see your list of students over here. And you have this status button that you click on to toggle their attendance status. It starts as unmarked, which is this white circle with a line through it on a gray background. If you click it once, it's a green check mark for present. Twice is a red X for late, or sorry, that one's absent. And 3 times is an orange clock for late. 4 times gets you back to the beginning. If you click the More button next to a student, you can see their totals for present, late, and absent. You can change their status here as well. And you also have this excused absence badge. So I could say Marcus is absent, but it's an excused absence. But I actually wouldn't recommend doing it this way because there are some caveats that go along with using this badge. The first is it doesn't impact the attendance grade for that session. So the way this would be calculated is as Marcus being absent, 0 credit for the day. Even though you have this badge here, it's just something to mark it as excused. It doesn't impact the grade. So if you want it to be attached to a different grade, like maybe give Marcus 100% since it was excused, you would have to select present. Or if you want to dock it a little bit because you don't want an excused absence to be full credit, you could call it late. The other caveat to this badge is it's not reportable. So I don't see a tally for it over here. You just have to see it in the session for that student. That's the only way you can see whether it was excused or not. So it's there and you can use it, but two important caveats go along with it. How much are students docked for being late versus being present, you might wonder. You can check that out up here in the settings menu, this gear icon. And if you select roll call settings, you can decide not to count attendance toward the final grade if you want. By default, it does count. And you can change how much that late counts versus a present. Not just that late, all of the lates in your tool, which I think was obvious, but I said it strangely. Okay. Moving on. We're circling back to modules now. First, I'm going to give you sort of a higher level overview of what we can do here, and then we'll get into actually editing and adding content to your modules. So you may have noticed I didn't have to turn editing on to get any of these features that you see here. You can edit anything in Canvas anytime like this. So I'm going to work my way kind of left to right across the screen here and talk about what you can do with these things. Anywhere you see this grid of dots means you can drag and drop that thing around. So I can do that with an entire module, or I can do that with an individual item. If you've ever tried to do this in OL, this is much, much easier. Moving to the right a little bit, for items specifically, they each have an identifying icon next to them, kind of like you have in OL. You have a piece of paper that represents a page resource, which works exactly the same way in Canvas as it does in OL. You also have pieces of paper with pencils on them. Those are assignments, mostly work the same way as they do in OL. These text bubbles are discussion forums. And a spaceship, of course, means a quiz. I don't know what other icon would make sense for a quiz other than a spaceship, obviously. Moving over to the right, we have these green check marks and red circles with lines through them. Those mean the content is published or unpublished, and you can just quickly toggle it by clicking on it. You may have noticed that unpublished content within the module, when I published this module, was automatically published. That's a quirk, which is designed to let you quickly publish all of the content in a module rather than having to go through and publish each and every little thing. But you may not always want that. So if you want something unpublished after you publish a module, just know you're going to have to toggle it back the other way. It took me a few frustrating times to figure that out. For modules, to the right of those publish and unpublish icons, you have a plus icon. That's how you add content to a module. We'll do that in a little bit. Each module has one. And then to the right of that, you have your more buttons, the 3 dots. So when you click on a more button, we're not going to talk about everything in here. Modules, by the way, you can delete from modules, which makes sense, but not really anything else. When you edit a module, you don't have many settings to look at here. You just have the name. You can lock it until a specific date and time. You can add a requirement. So that just means do these things in this module to mark it as complete. If it's not the first module, you can also set up prerequisites that say you have to complete the Canvas resources module before you can get access to this one. If you click the more button next to an item and click edit, all you can change is the name. That's a little bit different than OL, right? So to edit an item that exists in modules, the way we need to do that is first click on the item and then click that edit button within it that we saw on the home page. We'll look at that in a second. Two other things I want to point out in this More menu, though, that we don't have in OL, which I love. Send to. You have this for modules and items within modules. So I can send a whole module's worth of stuff or an individual item to anybody else in Canvas. So if I create a quiz halfway through the semester and I want to share it with my colleagues, I can click send to, type in their names, select them, click the send button. Then over here in their account menus, they see they have some shared content. They can preview it, add it to any of their course sites, then they have their own copy. Love that option. The next one, copy to, basically the same thing, but this is just for you to send to other course sites that you have. So again, create a quiz halfway through the semester, you want to send it to the other two sections of the course, you copy that item to another course, and you can even say, I want it in this module, and I want it to show up right before that thing. And then you can send it directly there, and you're done with it. It's all set. All right. Now let's talk about the content. Like I said, you're going to be starting with your migrated content, so you'll likely want to be editing things probably before you add things. So we're going to talk about them in that order. So like I said, if you need to edit anything that already exists in Canvas, you first need to click on it and then click the edit button up in the top right. That's true for pages, assignments, quizzes, all that stuff. This is a page resource, basically the same as what you have in OL, like I said before. Those extra options that you have in the text editor, we're going to talk about now. And they're all contained in these 4 buttons here. So we have our link button, images, media, and documents. And you can use them like you think you can, like to link out to a third-party website and upload stuff directly to the page. But you can also, if you click on these down arrows, get access to course links or course images or course media or course documents. And what that means is for links, you see all of the different types of things that exist in your Canvas course site, and you can link to specific things in there that exist in your Canvas course site. So let's say this page is a resource related to an upcoming assignment. I can expand the assignments menu, find that assignment, and link them to it. Or let's say I'm editing my homepage and I want to update those buttons to send students to specific modules that I've created. I have all my modules here. I can update that button to send my students to a specific module. You just highlight the button and do what I just did. Updates the link. For these other options, say you want to use the same image in multiple places in Canvas, you don't have to upload it multiple times. Once you upload it once, it's available to select and just add to a page somewhere else. That's really great because it doesn't count against the files you're uploading to the course. Same thing with course media, all your audio and video that aren't in Canvas Studio or Kaltura show up here. And documents is sort of a catch-all for all those other file types that don't fit those other categories. With PDFs and stuff, if you link those, you can say, make it download only. You can say if they click on it, they can preview it in the page so they don't have to download it. Lots of fun options there. The other thing that's different about the text editor in Canvas, as opposed to OL, is you have this accessibility checker down here, this little person inside of a circle. If there's a number next to the accessibility checker, you should click it. That will tell you what the accessibility checker has identified as a potential accessibility issue. Perhaps it's an image missing alternative text. Contrast is too low for something, so you might have to change the color of something. All sorts of stuff. So if you see a number, definitely check that out to make sure it's not calling on that incorrectly. When you're finished, you can click save. I'm not going to because I don't need those things in there. So, with pages and things like that, pages, assignment descriptions, you're really just doing work that you likely would have to do every semester anyway, just changing like semester specific language. Any references to OL probably you'll want to get rid of. Due dates, things like that. There might be some formatting things that happen from moving from OL to Canvas, but there shouldn't be much of that. So most of the text-based editing you're going to be doing is stuff you would be doing every semester anyway. And then some of the things you'll be doing in terms of editing your activities will be like that as well, like due dates you would update every semester. But things you should just check out at least the first time through after migration are your activity settings, because the settings screens or settings options from OL to Canvas aren't always one-to-one. A lot of them are, but not all of them. So you'll want to make sure things are set up the way you want them to be set up. So you'll click on an assignment and click edit. Again, in here, this is all just semester specific stuff you'll want to change, but make sure your grading options are set up properly. Your assignment group is what Canvas calls gradebook categories. We'll talk about that more in a little bit, so make sure it's in the right one still. We'll talk about submission types a little bit later as well, but just review these settings for your assignments to make sure they're configured the way that you want them to be in Canvas versus OL. Not a lot to look at for assignments, but if you use quizzes in OL, you'll want to take a little bit of a closer look. So this is a quiz, which we can edit up here the same way we're editing everything else. We have a few tabs up here, mastery paths we don't need to worry about. But these first two, details is just your settings. So the main thing I would concern myself with in here is this section that controls what students can see about their submitted attempts and correct or incorrect answers, which work differently than the options in OL. So just make sure it's set up the way you want it to be. That's the main thing here. And then I would go to the questions tab. You don't have to spot check every single question in here. Multiple choice questions are going to translate just fine. So true, false. Most of the basic ones are going to be just fine. But there are some question types in Canvas that don't exist in OL and vice versa. So if you're using fancier or more complex question types like drag and drop, or fill in the blank, things like that in OL, come check them out in here to make sure they're working the way you want them to in Canvas. And the way you do that is you just click the pencil icon next to the question and take a look. This is just a multiple choice question, so that's pretty straightforward. Reach out to us if you have questions about quizzes and quiz questions. All right, that's editing stuff. I'm going to spend not long showing you how to add stuff. And I'm just going to show you how to add an assignment because we've looked at the settings screens for the rest of the stuff for the most part, which will be basically the same for a lot of things. But a couple extra things I wanted to point out in assignments. So like I mentioned earlier, to add something to your modules page, you just find the module you want to add it to and click the plus icon next to the publish or unpublish icon. In here, you have a menu of the different things you can add to the module. We're doing assignment. And then you have the full list of assignments that exist in this course site already. And that's related to what I mentioned before about where things live, right? So you could create an assignment in the assignments page and then just come here and add it where you want it. And that's how you do that. I like just creating my stuff in the modules page. So the way I do it is I highlight create assignment or whatever and give it a name. This one's homework 1. Then click add item. It'll show up just like an OL, at the bottom of the module it belongs to, unpublished, to give you time to click on it and edit it, just like we edit everything else. Most of this stuff we've already talked about. I'll give it a point value. It's in the proper assignment group already, but I do want to point out submission types, mostly the same as in OL, but a little different. We have no submission, which both acts as a visual cue to your students. They don't have to submit anything at all for this assignment anywhere, not here, not in person, anywhere. And they can't. It removes those settings. That's for like presentations, performances, stuff like that. On paper, functions the same way as no submission, doesn't let them submit anything, but it's a visual cue to say you're turning something in physically to your instructor. That's for like in-class exams or whatever. And then you have online, which is what we're all used to. You have lots of different options for that, which you can mix and match. Some of the options give you more options. A couple other things just to be aware of. There are peer review assignments in Canvas, which is pretty great. And then if you need to differentiate due dates or availability dates for students, you can do that down here. So by default, you're assigning this to everyone at this due date with these availability settings. If you want, you can click the add button and say, Marcus gets different due dates, different availability dates, and everyone else, now it says everyone else up here instead of everyone, gets whatever you put here. And you can do that multiple times. So those are easy ways to provide extensions. We're not going to cover how to create quizzes. That would take another half an hour or so. So if you have questions about that, I encourage you to come to the activity session we'll be delivering soon. Okay, last two things, and I promise these will be quick. Setting up your gradebook. I know, how can that be quick? I promise it's quick. And grading in Canvas. So like I said, setting up your gradebook is not done through the grades page here. It's actually done through assignments, which is kind of strange, the first time hearing. But if we go to assignments, we'll notice a few things. We'll notice it sort of looks like the modules page. But over on the right, we have these percentage of the course total indicators here. So this is how you set up the weights for your gradebook. Another oddity of the assignments page is that it's not just the place where you view all of your assignments, it's the place where you view all of your gradable activities in Canvas. So your assignments show up and your gradable discussion forums and your beloved spaceship quizzes. They all show up here in assignments. These are, think of them as the gradebook items. And these, what are called assignment groups in Canvas, are what you would think of as gradebook categories in OL. So your migrated content should include your gradebook setup. If you need to edit anything about that existing setup as you see it here, you can click the More button, click Edit, change the name and percentage of total grade, do some other stuff here. If you need to add a category, assignment group, I'll do that a lot. In Canvas, you just click Add Group up in the top right, give it a name. So this one's homework. And it's 10% of the total. You save it, shows up at the bottom, ready for activities to be populated, which I can do by just dragging them in there if they already exist. Or if I'm creating them from scratch, I select the appropriate assignment group in the settings menu when I'm creating them. So remember I said those grid of dots, you can use those to move things anywhere you see them. You'll notice Canvas let me put in assignment group totals that tally more than 100%, which is not a good thing to do because we'll see grades we don't expect at the end. So make sure you do your math and double check that. I'm going to delete this so it goes back to 100. All right. I think that's everything I wanted to point out here. Yeah. Let's go talk about grading in Canvas. You can use the same kind of workflow that you use in OL. You'll just go to your content and find the thing you want to grade and click on it. And this is where it diverges slightly. You're just going to click on the SpeedGrader link up in the top right, and that'll pop open a new tab for the SpeedGrader in Canvas, which is how you'll grade your gradable activities. This looks a lot like the assignment grader in OL. You have your students up in the top right. You can tab through or select from the dropdown. Here's that test student I mentioned earlier that gets created when you go into student view that you can submit things on behalf of. Once you're viewing a student's submission, if it's not text, depending on what the content is, you might see a preview of media, you might have to download it. Basically the same as OL. You have your annotation options along the top. So your point annotations, you can leave comments on. Pretty much every annotation you can also add a comment to, which is kind of nice. So like if I highlight something, I can explain why I highlighted it. Same thing with strike through. I can explain why I struck through it. Back myself into a grammatical corner there. The drawing tool and the shape tool all can add comments. You can change the color of all these comments, by the way. So maybe you want some green ones instead. Over here, you enter the grade. And down here, you add your comments. You have emojis in Canvas, very fancy. One of the suggested or frequently used emojis is the eye roll emoji. That's fun. I'm not going to submit that one. You have your attachment button, which is available in OL, but these two to the left of it are new to Canvas. The first one, this sort of speaker icon, is speech to text. So if you click the record button in here and start speaking, it's just going to type out whatever it thinks you're saying about as accurately as automated YouTube captions would. So editing required probably, but it could save you some time. And then you have the record audio or video button on the fly down here as well. So if the assignment required students to submit a submission of themselves doing a thing, rather than trying to type out a comment about it or explaining how they could do a thing differently, you could show them how to do the thing differently right here.